Je vais passer maintenant la parole au docteur Godwin Mouranga, qui est le secrétaire exécutif du CODESRIA. Thank you, Godwin. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, Advisor to the President, representative of the Minister, if present, representative of the Vice Chancellor of the University, Sheikh Anta Diop, faculty, students, the Secretary General to SUDES, all protocol observed. First, I want to thank the organizers of this conference on academic freedom for inviting CODESRIA to join and participate in the conference. This is important for us in many ways. It is important partly because CODESRIA is in fact a pioneer organization in the struggle for academic freedom generally, but also particularly in its intervention in Africa. In 1995, or slightly before, a number of academics operating partly through the University of Dar es Salaam, but also eventually through CODESRIA, came up with two important declarations that have become useful in defining the terrain of academic freedom in Africa. Initially through the faculty union at the University of Dar es Salaam, a declaration on intellectual freedom was adopted in the early 90s. Later on, CODESRIA organized a conference in Kampala in 1995, at which the Kampala Declaration on Intellectual Freedom and the Social Responsibility of the Academic was adopted. That instrument has become perhaps one of the most important instruments in guiding our thinking around academic freedom in Africa. It has been an instrument that has been used together with many other instruments in the struggle to defend the rights of academics. A few years ago, CODESRIA organized another conference in Malawi at which we revisited the Kampala Declaration. And through all this, I must pay homage to my predecessor at CODESRIA, Dr. Ebrima Sall. Unfortunately, he's not here yet, who was the first program officer in charge of our portfolio on academic freedom at CODESRIA. And over the years that he served CODESRIA, he's been useful in mobilizing academics both in the region and across the continent in support of the struggles for academic freedom. However, a few years ago, due to restrictions and constraints of funding, our academic freedoms program has not performed at par with previous expectations. There are several reasons for this. One of the reasons for this is that in the 1980s and 1990s, when we were working towards the Kampala Declaration on intellectual freedom, the state was the main abuser of academic freedom in Africa. A good many of the governments that dotted the continent in the 1980s were either authoritarian, outrightly dictatorial, or in fact, many of them were military regimes. Controlling the movement of academics, controlling the movement of intellectuals, controlling how intellectuals thought about society was defined as one of their key engagements. So it was easy, at least at the level of mobilization, to get numerous people to come together in defense of academic freedom, mainly because the target of that struggle was clearly defined and was evident in our lives almost on a daily basis. At the time, trade unions, university faculty unions were not allowed. The capacity of university staff, the capacity of intellectuals across the terrain to mobilize together with trade unions in order to defend academic freedom was restricted. And so our enemy at the time was clear, and we knew what to do about it. Today, the main abuse of academic freedom does not come from the state alone. The nature of the challenge of intellectual freedom is no longer exclusively targeted against the state. The abuse of intellectual freedom has spread across the social terrain. And among these, I must mention, has been a problem of financing the defense of academic freedom, especially for those of us who operate in institutions of higher learning. Sustaining the struggle in defense of academic freedom is limited by our own capacity to finance that struggle. And worse, as universities begin to experience serious challenges in terms of their resource mobilization strategies, and when governments are no longer supplying enough resources to even make sure that the academic life of any community of scholarship, be it within the university or outside the university, is done, we are facing a challenge against which it is very difficult to mobilize. And so the struggle is increasingly shifting from a focus on the state to a whole variety of other forces using different strategies geared towards making sure that your capacity to move as an intellectual, your capacity to articulate your thoughts as an academic is restricted in ways perhaps that you have little alternative to struggle against. It is in this context that a new development has happened within our own institutions of higher learning in particular, where in the 1990s, universities were defined in particular by the kind of vibrant debates that they conducted based on the research that intellectuals had done in order to understand society. Today, that is not the defining character of our universities across the board. Just about 2 weeks ago, one of our colleagues, Professor Isa Shivji in Dar es Salaam, gave the Mwalimu Nyerere distinguished lecture at the University of Dar es Salaam. And one of the points he raised was the depth of civic engagement among intellectuals within the university in support of developments within society. Across many of our university campuses, student activism is not necessarily defined by how well they want to defend developments in society that they need to, but more about religious mobilization, more about the development of cultic behavior, more about things that are important, but not necessarily things that will advance academic freedom in society. Worse is that abuse of academic freedoms within institutions of higher learning has become perhaps a major problem, and it takes various forms. I am particularly concerned about abuse of academic freedoms based on gender, where the very respect of gendered forms of expression is not given its due presence within the universities, where to date female academics find it very difficult to articulate their thinking about issues that are important to them because our universities remain patriarchal in orientation, masculine in thinking, where the idea that people can speak towards and express themselves effectively around notions of feminism, some of which remain very basic to society, is frowned upon by a larger segment of our own populations within the university, where all forms of intolerance based on gender, based on religion, based on age, have become a defining character of the experiences of young academics within universities. So yes, the state remains a danger to academic freedom, I want to underscore, but it is not only the problem that we are faced with at the moment. The gender dimension of abuse of academic freedom has found even greater space with the continued emergence of social media as a space of discussion. And again, within social media, we have advanced significantly in terms of the freedoms that we want to enjoy. But just like we have advanced using social media, using technology, too many people are listening to me, but they are not here, we must recognize the emergence of various forms of abuse, especially those based on sexuality, those that involve body shaming, those that require, that want to silence people, not for any other reason, but because they said things that you may not necessarily disagree with. So as we go forward, Mr. Secretary General, I think that we need to begin to think about two possible ways forward. Number one is to begin to open up internal conversations within institutions of higher learning about various forms of abuse, various forms of intolerance that are crippling our own capacity to mobilize as a team and engage the rest of society. I think that's going to be critical if we have to make advances in that direction of securing our freedoms as academics, as intellectuals. I also take note that the rest of society has, over the years, begun to treat academic freedom as an esoteric thing, that which is only important for the intellectuals. And is that isolated terrain of people who are only struggling about specific things that benefit them. So the thing we need to do also is to begin to open up a conversation with the rest of society, because the importance of intellectual freedom is not only for us as academics, for us as intellectuals. It is a conversation that needs to spread in society, because what we do within our own limited forums is for the society. And so, as I conclude my remarks, I want to reiterate a point that the Secretary General of SUDES mentioned, a willingness on the part of CODESRIA, effective 2022, to expand our intellectual freedoms, academic freedoms program in conversation with institutions like yours, in conversation with institutions like UNESCO, in order to begin to have a vibrant conversation, but also to support research, to support monitoring, and to support activism that begins to make this not just that which we discuss in a conference like this, but actually something that is discussed across the board all the time, because it's important to us. And so we will be opening up conversations with a number of institutions and organizations. Our starting point this coming September or October is going to be a major conference that we want to hold specifically in Burkina Faso, at which we hope to mobilize our colleagues in Burkina Faso, within the university and outside, to begin a conversation about how best can intellectuals contribute to the democratization and opening up of society in general. And I will be sending out invitations to colleagues, some of the colleagues in this conference on this. We will then follow up with another pilot program in Tanzania, and if it works well next year, I hope we can conduct various regional meetings in all the regions of CODESRIA to make this something that we have to do. And we are happy to partner with UNESCO and with SUDES on doing the particular program here in Senegal in particular, but broadly in the West African region generally. The idea is to begin to think about what does activism based on research contribute to opening our societies a little bit more. That is the question that I think we are here to answer. That is the question that we as CODESRIA want to join you in supporting. So again, I want to thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope that this is the starting point of broader collaborations going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodwin.